ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today, I wanted to talk about the old Sims games, old Maxis games. Because Maxis used to be a really fantastic company. They were a lot of fun. They released a lot of really creative and not exciting, just very accessible, casual games with some really neat gimmicks in them. And I was thinking today, just having a little stroke of nostalgia about, back when I used to play SimCopter and Streets of SimCity and all that. I owned a ton of Sim games. I mean, it wasn't really just because, I don't know if my sister was old enough to really appreciate that sort of stuff, but it was a series that my mom could also get into. Like, I remember the original Sims. It was actually kind of a bit of a comedy, because me and my sister would play The Sims a fair amount, but the one who really got into The Sims, I think, was my mom. So, like, we weren't even, like, they would release these expansion sets for The Sims, and, like, me and my sister would just be like, yeah, no. My mom would go out and buy the expansion sets, and then install them, and we'd be like, oh, okay. So we kind of benefited from my mom being a fan of the games. But I really liked SimCity 2000 and Streets of SimCity and SimCopter. And I also played like Sim Ant and Sim Tower. I never really got it. I think I didn't really understand Sim Tower. I was too young at the time. Sim Earth I had. Sim Earth I found a little bit boring. But yeah, The Sims. Maxis used to be this kind of fantastic company. And sadly they've lost that reputation now. They were purchased by EA Games, and if you know anything about EA Games practices, in my opinion, what I think that they do is basically EA, they look for like really well-performing brands, good intellectual properties like The Sims or Destroy All Humans was another one they bought. They bought the Burnout series, things like that. Just these brands that are looking really good, that have like a following. People are like, they're excited for the next sequel to come out, whatever. So EA will buy those games, and then they cut the budget, and then they release a sequel to the game, and it won't be any good, but all the fans will buy it anyway because they're excited, and it's always been a trustworthy brand in the past. And then they get the game, and they're really disappointed, and they're really upset, and EA runs away with all the money, and then they shutter the brand because they're not going to be able to fool anyone twice that way. They're sort of like you could think like they flip intellectual properties in a way. It's like imagine if they bought a really nice house, and then like removed all the plumbing or something from it, so they could sell the copper pipes. And then they sold people the house, but they sold it as though they hadn't removed all the copper pipes. That's kind of what EA does. They're like they're just a malicious flipper. They don't really sell you, they don't sell you the product that you're looking for. They sell kind of a gutted version of the product that you were looking for, oftentimes, in many people's opinions. But anyway, that's sort of the sad thing. I mean, these days, The Sims, like every new iteration of The Sims, it was actually because I was talking to Aisu. Aisu likes The Sims a lot, and so she's got The Sims 3 or The Sims, whatever Sims they're on now, she's got it. And so she was downloading a bunch of content, and I was like, oh man, I remember when I was playing Sims 1 way back. And Sims 1 I had a lot of fun with, because at first you played the game normally, and you have your families, and you get them into like, oh, you're the top of the military now, you're a military general, you get to tell everybody else, why that they don't deserve a raise. That's what it means. And that's the normal way to play. Everybody likes to make their families, or a lot of people like to make their families. I believe that my mom made us in the game, and then just took care of us, and then like I would make us in the game, and then I don't know, lose interest, because it would, like, I wouldn't know what I wanted to do with my family if I was playing them in a game. I know some people, like, I know little sisters often know the story of, like, oh yes, they made us in the game, and then she got bored, and there was just sex, like, for days, and then thousands of children, and this is what happened. But I remember Sims 2, I think, is probably, in my opinion, about the pinnacle of that series. They removed a fair amount of content. In Sims 1, what was nice is there was a lot of like highly available, free downloadable content that you could get. And so I remember in Sims 1, I eventually had a neighborhood, and like all the neighbors were just like they were out of like, it was like a really badly designed sitcom, like with a bunch of intellectual, like some of them were intellectual properties that just wouldn't, like Darth Vader lived up in one of the lots. Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine, they were roommates, and that by itself was kind of a comedy, because I just created the characters, and I was trying to sort of fashion them in a way that I thought would be fitting for the characters. And so Emperor Palpatine wound up successfully very grumpy, and like he didn't like people, he didn't like to socialize, he didn't like Darth Vader, he didn't like anyone. Emperor Palpatine hated everybody. And then Darth Vader was... Something went wrong when I was making Darth Vader's personality, because Darth Vader wound up incredibly childish. Like, he loved pizza, and it just cracked me up because every time that he would talk to anyone else in the neighborhood or Emperor Palpatine, the conversation would always be steered towards pizza. Like, they would start to talk to him about, like, you know, I don't know, bicycles or whatever, and he would go, oh, no bicycles, pizza, pizza. And so you'd see, like, pizza would come up over his head over and over and over again. Like, every conversation, he just wouldn't shut up about pizza. And so like, I got the hint, and I started to just, like, Darth Vader ordered pizza. Like, I would just have him, every time he got hungry, I'd be like, Darth Vader orders pizza. Here we go, Darth Vader. Because you could give him free will as well, but you could also tell him what to do. And so just be like, yeah, Darth Vader orders pizza. And then he'd leave the pizza boxes out, and Emperor Palpatine would have to go and clean them up, and that would put Emperor Palpatine in a bad mood. And so pretty soon, like, I had Darth Vader's bedroom was, like, painted in polka dots, and he had a hamster, and the hamster bit him all the time. And I don't know if this was programmed into the game, or if it was just, like, I'm not sure how much of it was really programmed in, or how much of it were just patterns that emerged through the random number generators or whatever. But it seemed like every time Darth Vader went to go play with that hamster, it bit him. He couldn't play with that hamster without biting him. I bought him a fireworks set, and he loved the fireworks set until he launched a firework onto his roof. That was tragic. Emperor Palpatine liked to read. Emperor Palpatine liked to be indoors, and he liked to read. Darth Vader caused trouble. It was a sitcom relationship. Like, they got in fights all the time. Emperor Palpatine was always cleaning up after Darth Vader. I believe that Emperor Palpatine was the one who saved everyone after the house caught fire by that rocket. I think that Emperor Palpatine was also advancing through his career faster, so Emperor Palpatine was he was the straight man to Darth Vader's, like, pizza-loving whatever. Their neighbors were, like, a bunch of demons, and this was kind of funny because I downloaded, like, a demon body, and then what I did is I just put, like, people's heads on it, so they were, like, walking around with these, like, red, you know, like, red satanic demon bodies, and then, like, just human heads. And so it was, like, really weird and really creepy, but otherwise they were, like, normal people. Except I downloaded a whole bunch of, like a bunch of torture devices and things like that you could use as, like, you could turn on, like, a torture device, and it was actually a television, according to the game. So, like, they would sit there and they would, like, laugh at the torture device or whatever. Like, that was how they had designed it. So, you know, like, they'd clap and laugh and, torture device, this is great. You know, cages, like, they'd sit on chairs and they'd be made out of human bones and stuff like that. And so that was just weird. But they were friendly as well. And then the Grim Reaper lived next door. And the Grim Reaper was actually kind of funny. The Grim Reaper was a doctor, of course. He had to be a doctor. And the Grim Reaper got to be rich. The Grim Reaper lived in, like, the prettiest, most luxurious house in the entire neighborhood. He had all these, like, beautiful paintings up and things like that. These like, columns. I took a lot of painstaking care designing the Grim Reaper's house. I don't know what it was, just something about the Grim Reaper. Like, I always liked the idea of a personified Grim Reaper, probably because I think by then I was already reading Discworld. And so in my head, like, the Grim Reaper was sort of just a misunderstood individual. So, oh yeah, there was also a bunch of dead kids or something like that out in his backyard, because you could, like, drown people and then, like, put their gravestones down, and then there would be a haunting. So the Grim Reaper had, like, a bunch of graves back there. Like, I killed a bunch of people before I had the Grim Reaper move in because I wanted a theme. This was a lot of work. This was a lot of work to get the Grim Reaper set up in his house correctly. And then there was, like, one family that lived nearby, and it was just like an ordinary family. And it was something like, this was almost like a progressive family show kind of thing. It was like a mixed race relationship with, like, a son who was trying to get A's in school and stuff like that. It was just like they were a middle income family, you know, living in a middle income house. Like, the dad got about halfway through his career, and the mom was like I don't know, a painter or something like that. But that was all Sims 1, and you could just download a ton of stuff to sort of, like, get a lot more mileage out of it. Sims 2, I believe, is when EA came in and they started to crack down a bit on downloadable content. You got a lot more pay-to-use stuff, like people selling the content, and then you had to give a cut to EA. I think Sims 2 is when they got on that. And I'm not sure, but they might have cracked down on it very hard. It seems like something EA would do, but I just recall that for a while you couldn't find any kind of free, free stuff for The Sims 2. It really just wasn't out there. But Sims 2 though was an improvement over Sims 1. I mean, you got over to that, and you could do a bit more, and there was some exciting things in there. Like, I mean, they had motivations and stuff like that. And Sims 2 is where character design got a little bit more nuanced, I believe, and so I had some families that were doing some interesting things. I never got anything quite as wacky as the Darth Vader Demon Grim Reaper Society with the progressive television family nearby. It was with that one, I just got more into like making kind of human sort of Sims. So for example, I had one where there was like an old woman, and her daughter and son still lived with her, and her daughter had a kid, but she was a single mom. The daughter was a single mom. And so I was just trying to take care of this family, and like the son, I purposefully designed him to be like an unambitious slob, and the grandma was like the closest thing to a breadwinner, but she really wasn't that good. And the sister was like really hardworking. Like the daughter was really hardworking. The little girl was like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It was like she was just like a little girl from a broken home, kind of. You could like the clothes and everything I designed for it. It all came together really well. And what was actually really fun about it was you could really get to see in The Sims how much having one bad sim could drag down the entire rest of the family. Like there's this poor little girl, because in that game, in Sims 2, it really helped the kids if an older adult helped them with homework, especially if the older adult was like intelligent and could reasonably help with homework. But it was awful because the brother was like this terrible lazy slob, and because of that, every time he used anything in the house, like someone else would have to come along and clean after him otherwise, and it never even saved him time. Like he would just do things and it would take about the same amount of time as any other sim, but he would just leave a horrible mess in his wake every time he did something. And so I mean, like he would just drain the life out of the other Sims. Like every time he used the shower or the restroom, like someone else would have to then go and clean it up, and it would take away their valuable time, because the Sims they measured their days by minutes. And so if it took them like a minute to clean the bathroom, then that was like an hour gone. You know, the brother had destroyed an hour of someone else's time by just being a slob. So the brother was like, he was unemployed, and I did this intentionally. He was unemployed, and so what he would do is he was eating food, and he was making messes, and like he would order pizza because he was late. He would order pizza all the time. And so he was just like using up the family money and contributing nothing in return. And he had a bad attitude, so he got in fights with like the sister all the time. Like the grandma was super easygoing, so he never got in fights with the grandma, but he picked fights with his sister on a regular basis. And sometimes he would try to help the daughter, the little girl, with like homework, but he wasn't very smart, and so it would just be like a really slow, not very helpful process. It didn't really improve her grades. You know, it was awful. Like this guy was just a sheer drain. I think this was the most interesting family that I ever put together. And the conclusion, the eventual conclusion, was that I had the grandma start dating a local supervillain, and eventually she, I can't remember what happened, but I think I threw the kids out or something like that. I don't know if you could do that, or the grandma moved out, or I did something. I did something to where essentially it was like she split from the family, and then I moved the kids out or something like that so she could be alone with the supervillain. And then I kind of had them go off and do their own things, and it was kind of funny because once the brother got out of the picture, the mom and her little girl wound up doing a whole lot better. It was just like the brother was just so horrible for that whole family. Very, very interesting that you could do that. And then otherwise, you know, like I just had interesting sort of families. Like, you know, it got a little stale sometimes because you would just be doing the same thing over and over again. And without that wide variety of downloadable content, it was tough to keep the game fresh for yourself, you know. But I never really wanted to pay for anything in The Sims. I very rarely will pay for stuff in games. In fact, I think PlanetSide 2 is one of the few games that I've really invested much money in. But it was free to play, so it's you know, it's not too bad. I enjoy PlanetSide, so I'm okay with spending a little bit of money on extra stuff on that. You know, whereas The Sims, you already paid for it once. So it would be kind of frustrating to like pay for The Sims once and then be like, all right, now that you paid for The Sims, why don't you pay for some more content? Be like, there's already less content than there was in The Sims 1. I'm not really too impressed by this strategy. After that, though, I'm pretty sure that, like I say, they released the next game and it was like even less content than The Sims 2 compared to Sims 1. And they've just been going on like that. I mean, EA has developed, quite rightfully, a terrible reputation. And they will continue to have a terrible reputation. But The Sims, though, that's the one that a lot of people played very casually. A lot of people can relate to it. I mean, I played it for longer than any of the other games. Not specifically because I loved it the most, but because, I mean, like, when I was young, my mom really liked The Sims, and then when I got a little bit older, my girlfriend really liked The Sims, and it's like one of those things that's like a very accessible, everybody can play it game. So if you're gonna be playing a game and talk to like your loved ones about it, like you find like everybody's girlfriend plays The Sims. So if you want to talk to your girlfriend about a game or like share a file with your girlfriend, she'll play The Sims usually. So you know, that's one that's available. But games that I actually really loved when I was a kid, I really liked SimCopter and Streets of SimCity because they had this really neat thing that they did, where if you owned SimCity 2000, you could make a city in SimCity 2000, and then it would use the data from that city to make a map in Streets of SimCity or SimCopter. And then you could actually, like in Streets of SimCity, you could get in a car and you could drive around your city and do stuff in your city. Or in SimCopter, you could fly around and like rescue people off of buildings. The two games were diametrically opposed as to what they were going for. In Streets of SimCity, it was all about destruction and fighting. What you did is you drove around in a car with like a machine gun bolted on top, and you looked for other cars and you shot the cars to death. And there were a bunch of different scenarios that you could play, or you could even set up racetracks, and this would be fun, was you take like one of your cities and you'd create a racetrack. They had a racetrack editor. So you just go around, you'd say like, here's all the checkpoints, and you know, you have to drive through these. And so you'd like, your objective would be to race throughout your entire city, you know. And you could get to see like how easy was your city to actually navigate, like based on the roads that you'd laid down. So if you set down like a really intelligent system for driving around the cities, then things did really well. And you could set up some interesting racetracks. But if you're really poor, then you wind up with all kinds of like crazy winding, you know, stuff. The only trouble with that was that the AI was not able to use highways, I think. So if you installed highway systems in SimCity 2000, then you could get on them, and then the AI would just get confused. So that was not so great. I mean, the highway didn't make you go any faster. It was you broke all the laws in Streets of SimCity anyway. But aside from the other cars that you're supposed to be blowing up, there wasn't really a lot of like stuff in Streets of SimCity. What you played that game for was a bunch of different scenarios where they had things that you were supposed to do. Like you were supposed to, for example, there'd be all these black cars that were driving around in one of the scenarios, and you were supposed to go and the black cars were they were blowing up schools. And they explain in the game, they're like, it's the weekend, so none of the kids are at school. And it was almost kind of funny because it was like this sort of dual, like oh, the kids will be thrilled when all the schools are blown up, but for their own good, you need to protect those schools so the kids can learn and get their education. So you were like the good guy, and so what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to go and blow up all these evil black cars. And the guys in the black cars with their machine guns. You're supposed to blow them up before they could destroy all the schools. And I remember as a kid, I was always like, what if I just let them blow up the schools? I mean, would it be so bad? Like the kids wouldn't have to go to school. They get off of school for a good while. But you would fail if you did that. There was a bunch of stuff that you had to do. I can't remember. They also had these weird premises. One of them, you were like a grandma, and you were supposed to be saving the president from an alien invasion, and so all the people, like, it was all like black cars and like gigantic trucks and things like that. You could have little racers, but they they just used all these little things, and they would just recontextualize whatever you were playing and make a new scenario. Like if you blew up a local power plant, for example. I don't recall if this worked like this in Streets of SimCity, but in SimCopter it definitely did. But in a nuclear power plant, if it exploded, it wiped out the city because the entire city would explode. But the objective, there are different objectives, whether you're supposed to race through things or you're supposed to be, there was one where you were like a truck driver, and the objective was to pick up packages and then deliver them to all these different points around the city, while like these other cars were trying to kill you and the police were trying to arrest you and so on and so forth. If you got arrested, then you'd lose, and if you got blown up, of course you'd lose. So it was fun. It was a fun game. And like I said, my favorite thing though, I mean, between Streets of SimCity and SimCity 2000, the two games gave each other so much more mileage, because when you could design your own cities, you know, you would play in SimCity 2000 for a while, and you'd be happy with your city, and you'd feel really good, and then you'd go and you'd get in Streets of SimCity, and you'd drive around, and you'd play there for a while. And then you'd feel really good, and you'd be like, oh man, this is really cool. This city looks really good. I'm really happy about this. Because Streets of SimCity was a 3D environment. It was a way to explore your city. And so then you go back into SimCity 2000 some more, and you keep working on it, because you got that positive feedback of, I had a fun time in my city playing this other game. SimCopter was the exact same way, but from a slightly different perspective. With SimCopter, instead of like fighting, it wasn't a fighting game. It was like a search and rescue kind of game. SimCopter, you got a bunch of different helicopters. You could get inside the helicopter and fly it out to like a burning building, and you could pick up water with like a bucket. You could dump the water on the burning building, and you would save your burning building. You would save your town, save your city. You know, people would get injured, and so you would drop down, provide them with medical evac. You could pick up a doctor, take them there. The doctor would save them. You know, you could summon ambulances. You could break up traffic jams. It was a lot of fun. It was another kind of way to sort of explore your city and get around and have a look at things. There was also an alien spacecraft that would fly around, and I always thought that this was kind of fun. And if the alien spacecraft flew overhead, sometimes it would shoot lasers down, and it would set the building on fire, like it would set things on fire. And it would blow up cars or buildings or whatever, and then you have to go and rush, and you have to put it out because those darn aliens. They would also abduct people, which was weird. I mean, there was like a lot of bizarre things, like lots of just Easter eggs, or what felt like Easter eggs in that game. Like, for example, I remember if you use the "Have a nice day" call, like you could just fly around and be like, "Hello, everyone, have a nice day," or evening, whatever the case. And he would do that. If you spammed it, then what would happen is you would start to behave like the UFO, and you could actually, like, people would get sucked up into your helicopter, as though you were the UFO. Like, people were getting abducted into your helicopter. And so that was weird. And if you did it for long enough, it actually summoned the UFO, and then the UFO would be overhead, like flying around, watching you, you know, and it was just weird. But they had a career mode where you could go through and you could like, you were supposed to save people, and if you earned enough points and you earned enough money, then you advanced to the next level of your career. And every time you bought a new helicopter, I'm pretty sure it carried over, but I might be mistaken. I know that if the city had a military base, though, you could go and you could get an Apache helicopter, and you could hunt down the UFO, and you had to fly up to the greatest altitude that the helicopter could reach, pretty much. And then you would chase the UFO, and you would shoot it with rockets. And if you shot it with enough rockets, the UFO would die, and you would get tons and tons of points because it was causing all kinds of trouble. The UFO was a source of a lot of the trouble. And what was weird, and what I never understood about the ending of that game, was that if you beat the career mode, you would see the aliens having a conversation about you, and they would talk about how you weren't quite yet ready. And then you would go back and you could keep playing for a while. And I always felt like there should have been something that came after that, and I don't think there was. I think it was just like they were just teasing. But the aliens would have that conversation even if you blew them up beforehand. Even if theoretically there should have been no aliens. That game was also somewhat notable because there was a bit of a controversy where a gay guy who worked for Maxis he replaced, at the end of the scenarios, you were supposed to occasionally get like a parade, like everyone would be like, da 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 da. You know, hooray, you beat the game. And so there'd be like guys running around with tubas and like, you know, people dancing and stuff like that. And there were supposed to be like women running around in bikinis. And so there was a gay developer, and what he did is he replaced all the women in bikinis with like big muscular men. And when I say this, bear in mind that like this wasn't an era where graphics were really all that appealing. They were more like, you know, how could I say, like ovals, just sort of. Like, imagine, like, you know, all you could work with was, like, two-dimensional ovals. And that was pretty much what they looked like. They weren't really very humanoid. But still, he replaced all the women with men. And with, like, topless men in Speedos or whatever. And, like, when they got close to each other, they would make kissing noises. And so I remember they had to let that guy go, though. And it wasn't because he included the topless men in the thing. Because Maxis was actually a company that was pretty laid back about stuff. I mean, like, everything was very casual. Everything was very fun. It was all really, like, lighthearted and a lot of fun. But it was because he didn't ask anyone if that was going to be okay. And the trouble is, you can't really do that, because if you put things into a game, I mean, like if you look at, say, the hot coffee mod in Grand Theft Auto, they had a mode where you could sleep with your girlfriend in that game, and it got them an adults only rating because the ratings board didn't like it. You have to be careful about including stuff. You know, you don't want to like release a game and then after you've released it suddenly have an adults only rating slapped on the thing, and you can't sell it in stores. Then you have to recall all the copies and release another version that's been patched to not have what everything made everybody angry. So that was why they had to let him go. But I remember them saying, like, or reading about this, and they were just like, it was because he added a thing without permission. It really wasn't about the message. It was just about that he should have asked before he did that. And then of course there was SimTown, and I remember SimTown. It was like a very easy version of SimCity in a way. It was more kid friendly. SimTown was kind of like almost impossible to lose. As long as you had enough jobs as there were adults, then you were good to go. And I remember my dad used to kind of scoff at that one though, because I would make my own family in SimTown, and then like my dad would work at like the video store or something like that. And my dad was I'd really rather have a more ambitious job. And there weren't more ambitious jobs. You got to work at the video store, and that was where you worked. You got a humble job, grocery store, whatever. You know, you own the grocery store. That's what's so bad about that. It's a small town. Live in a small town. You have small town ambitions. That's your only option. So SimTown, not a lot I can say about SimTown, except for that it had a bunch of different things that you could click on. It was just sort of a cute game, good for kids, good for young kids. A lot less management. I mean, you didn't have to worry about budgets or anything like you did with SimCity 2000. You just sort of, you built your town, you had your people, you provided them with jobs, you know, whatever you did, it pretty much worked. It was very hard to screw up SimTown. But yeah. SimCopter though, I mean, like SimCopter, I wish that I could get that game again. I wish it was like OpenTTD, where like somebody had managed to get a hold of this game based on some kind of bizarre, I don't know, copyright quirk. I don't recall how exactly OpenTTD gets away with existing. But the music for SimCopter every now and then still gets stuck in my head, like the theme music for that. It had a good soundtrack, had a good premise. I mean, the whole thing, just the idea of like tying, I mean, what a brilliant idea to tie in like one of your games with another game. Like you've got this SimCity thing, and you tie it in with everything else. And of course, SimCity by itself was also very charming. They were all charming, great games, and they tied in together. It was such a great incentive to be like, so you don't have SimCity yet? Go out and buy it. You can play your cities in SimCopter. Or do you not have SimCopter? You can play in your SimCity. You know, that was a really fantastic idea, very novel idea. I wish that Maxis hadn't been bought by EA. I wish that they were still producing those fun and exciting games. I don't know if the modern day gaming industry is capable of still producing stuff like that, but if they are, I wish there were a company that was like Maxis still. Too bad on that. But of course SimCity, like I say, was fun as well. I remember that having a lot of just fun quirks in it. I mean, it was always kind of interesting. I thought it was neat that like if you access the debug mode in that game, you could summon in like biblical plagues. Like you could bring on a firestorm, or you could have like a flood that wiped out almost your entire city. And if the disasters got bad enough, there was a chance that a character named Super Sim would show up. And Super Sim was like a hero that could go do things. He could like blow up a monster, you know, by flying into it. He would just go over to it, blow up the monster, save your town. If a monster attacked otherwise, your town was basically doomed. But yeah, if I could find SimCity again, that would be like compatible with my like a modern OS, and you could just download it off the internet and not have to use EA's Origin software. I think I would. I miss those games. I wish I could play them again. I would play SimCopter, even though the graphics are probably horribly dated by now. I would play Streets of SimCity again. I miss that stuff. I don't think that we own the CDs anymore. I remember quite a while ago trying to find, like, do we still have these? Can I see if these work on Windows 7? I don't think they do, but I have to see if they would. I have to try. I just have to try. Yeah. They want you to buy the modern games now, but the old versions had charms for a lot of reasons. Yeah. But anyway, I suppose that'll be it for today. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I will catch you all next time.